Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast, everyone. My name is Elijah. For those of you on YouTube, you can probably see my face a little better than normal. I'm actually on Black Friday. I went and I got a webcam, and I don't know, I feel like I'm in the spotlight. There's a lot of light going on. I had to kind of move the window I typically look at and get it out of the light on this thing. It's a little bit bright. It feels a little weird, but we're gonna roll with it. I do think it makes for a better picture. I can't see myself over there. Um, we're rolling, and man, like these these winter meetings are something else. We are just finishing up day two here. The Orioles have been all over all sorts of rumors. You really uh, cannot express enough, as a fan of this team for a long time, how exciting it is to just be a part of this stuff. And not in any superficial kind of way. This is stuff that is getting leaked after the fact. Some huge news drops, and then, oh, all of a sudden, like, that'll spoil it. I'm not going to get there yet, but it does just feel good to be a part of this in a special kind of way, a way that the Orioles typically are not. It's very exciting. And I am sitting here at 9:07 on Tuesday night and Eastern time, I will say. And news is still coming out. Like just 20 minutes ago, I was just learning something new about the Orioles at the winter meetings. And man, it's happening. In many ways, this has been a really disappointing day for the Orioles, but I think that even just stopping and appreciating the fact that we are where we are sitting here and able to be in this moment where the Orioles are going after big free agents. They are trying to swing trades. They are just all in on 2026. That's what we want to see as fans. Um, and yeah, let's get into it a little bit. I think, the biggest news of the day, Kyle Schwarber signed with the Philadelphia Phillies, and that was a bummer. But the fact of the matter is, the Orioles matched this offer. It was kind of, kind of silly. Like, you had heard the Orioles have been tied to him, all this stuff. But when he signs this 5-year, $150 million deal, absolutely enormous deal, particularly for a DH who's going to play all of next year at 33 years old. This is not a guy who just happens to be the perfect free agent, is coming into free agency at 27. You're going to have him through his prime until 30. No. That is not this is an old man who cannot play the field. You could argue we have a gluttony of DH options right now between Tyler O'Neill, the time that Basayo and Adley are going to spend there. We have two first basemen on the roster with Mayo and Mounty. It's kind of ridiculous. There's no logical way that somebody like a Kyle Schwarber fits into this lineup. But Mike Elias, in recent days, as recently as yesterday, went ahead, held a press conference and said, we are trying to add impact bats. It does not matter what the position is. We want to raise the floor of this lineup, and we will figure it out after the fact. So, I think that I have this headline in front of me from The Athletic, which is a little bit irritating. They say Orioles matched the Phillies contract offer to Kyle Schwarber, which is in effect exactly the opposite of what had happened. If we scroll down a little bit further, this is coming from Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic, I should say. He goes ahead and he says Schwarber, who turns 33 in March, was always expected to return to Philadelphia. However, the Orioles' push essentially forced the Phillies to offer the same terms, one source said. To me, as an Orioles fan, what I get from this is a kind of scary, like, shadowed figure in the periphery that kind of reminds me of Corbin Burns. And, the Orioles made this uber competitive offer. Burns did say that, he said very explicitly he wanted the years. But if you do the math with the deferrals that Arizona went and gave him, and the fact that ours had no deferrals, was fully upfront, guaranteed, of course, we had a higher dollar value over those 4 years than Arizona gave him over 7 years. And not even talking about average annual value. It was more money up front. and I should say not even just, it was more money total over the 4 years than it would have been over the 6 years. So I think, the Orioles made this really competitive offer. Clearly, I remember the story of Corbin Burns going to the All-Star game. He flew in that day, had been at home in Scottsdale. He flew into the All-Star game, pitched the first 2 innings, and then jumped back on a plane to go back and hang with his family again. He's apparently got, I think, two little girls in Scottsdale. I don't blame him for all that. He wanted to go to Arizona. It is what it is. But it was disappointing because, it felt like the Orioles were on this kind of not level playing field. The Orioles had this huge offer out there. And then the phone just buzzed. Apologies. And then, Burns goes ahead and he just spurs up this other market out of nowhere. Like, apparently he had not been even talking to the D-backs. The deal came together in about 3 days, and it was like, dang, the Orioles really went for it, and it felt like we never even had a shot in the first place. Here, the Orioles push forced the Phillies to offer the same terms. So the Orioles go ahead, and what this sounds like to me is the Phillies said, yo, tell us what you get and we will match it. We don't want you going anywhere. We will match it. And, Schwarber was obviously comfortable there. He loved it. He talked about how much he loved it. And it seems like the Orioles never really had a shot at Schwarber. We were just a piece of leverage to raise his price. Now, I am not the kind of person to come to you here and say, Kyle Schwarber's wrong for doing that. He is a free agent and he should leverage the market in whatever way that best benefits him and gets him value, commensurate with the his abilities on the field. So not trying to knock Schwarber for this, but and kudos to his agent. If this was a situation where Schwarber just said, "Nah, I'm just going to go back to Philly and that's pretty much it," he's probably not even walking away with 9 figures, right? He has no leverage after he's given that up. But so we get here, and yeah, I mean, the Orioles throw 5 years and $150 million, $30 million a year at this guy who, again, just like he doesn't play a position. Like the only thing that he does is hit. And I'm a fan of hitting, as are most of you, esteemed listeners of the Warehouse Pod. I'm a fan of hitting, but it's a really, really painful thing to do, to lock somebody into the DH position. Particularly, just mentioned Adeline Basayo, we have people with legitimate bats who will need DH time. And so the thing that is so fascinating about this to me is that this is clearly the Orioles just kind of saying, yep, don't really care. We're going to throw some money around and we're going to just bring in talented dudes and then we'll figure it out. And I remember, very, very clearly when the Phillies went ahead and signed Schwarber and signed Castellanos, and everyone was kind of like, like what is this outfield even going to be? It seemed so ridiculous. And credit to them, they said, you know what, we're going to figure it out, and they have been on a run of multiple playoff appearances, like some relatively deep runs in October, NLCS. So I'm, it's a departure. It is not necessarily logical. It is not necessarily, I was using this phrase with in a group chat today, but it's not necessarily good process. It's not necessarily the thing that will keep your system and your organization healthy for a long time to come. That's not what this is. This is, we see an opportunity and we're going to bring in a guy who hit 56 home runs last year, and we're going to have him pepper the warehouse. Utah Street, nobody is safe. We're going to have him destroy baseballs, and we do not care what this contract looks like when he's a 37-year-old dude who, can barely swing a bat because, he's already not in the field. He's already losing that athleticism and everything. So it's kind of throwing caution to the wind a little bit. And I think that's something that we haven't seen from this Mike Elias, front office. That's something we haven't seen from this Orioles regime in a long while. Or ever, from this regime, I should say. And that's really awesome, frankly. It's really, really cool. I we could argue the merits of it as a like long-term viable solution. But I think that if you have built up a young core the way that this Orioles front office has, and the way this Orioles team like exists right now, you have the Gunners of the world, the Westbergs, the Kausers, etc., and presumably they will all take a step forward next year. But um, when you have all of them, you can afford to do something dumb for to maximize what happens in that period of controllability. That's kind of the whole advantage of having young talent, is you fill out the roster with young talent, and then you have extra money to splurge on somebody like this. And um yeah, so I think a very fundamental shift in the way that the Orioles are handling these winter meetings. I think a very fundamental shift in the way that the Orioles are attacking constructing their roster. And that's frankly just really, really exciting. It's frankly just, yeah, it's awesome. And I've come on and I've talked so much. Jesse, Jesse, my brother, of course, was knocking me today because he was like, Eli, you told me that going and signing a DH or first baseman was a bad idea. And if I speak bluntly, yeah, I mean it is a bad idea. I think it really overcomplicates things. You bring in a Schwarber who we might try to have play first base. I don't know. He's just a DH, but you bring in Schwarber, or you bring in a Pete Alonso, somebody we are obviously in contact with. We'll chat about that a little bit more in a moment. But you bring these guys in, and then man, you have to clear up space. You got to figure out what to do with Mountcastle at that point. Like paying him the termination fee if you cut him before opening day is probably, it's pennies on the Alonso or Schwarber dollar, and you're probably willing to just eat that. And then I think also like, but the larger thing is that you then have to figure out a trade for Mayo, and I don't even think it's to the point that Mayo becomes a trade chip. I think you have to, because if you block him for another year, or you go ahead and send him back down to AAA, he does still have options technically. But if you send him back down to AAA, then that's a complete and utter waste of his talent, frankly. And if you are bringing in Schwarber or Alonso for years and years to come, then those guys are going to, I it, they're going to be blocking him for years and years to come. Basayo's going to keep playing first base. There's no way for a Mayo to really exist for the next couple years if you're doing this. And so that then almost complicates your roster situation, I think, because then you have to figure out how to, you know, uh, maximize this value that you have. You now have like a clear surplus of value at first base, and you need to go ahead and figure out, okay, how do we reallocate this value sort of? How do we flip Mayo for a pitcher? How do we go do XYZ? And, if you do sign Pete Alonso, every team out there is going to say, you know, okay, yeah, you can trade us Kobe Mayo, but no, I'm not giving you a top arm for Kobe Mayo anymore. He's not helping your team in any way, shape, or form. You don't have leverage because clearly you just went and signed this guy, and clearly Pete Alonso is going to be playing first base and Kobe Mayo is not. That's how you lose all of your leverage. So the Orioles, have to kind of juggle all these things. And I do think it's complicated. And I do think that this was a 5-year deal. I think 4 or 5 years down the line, we're going to be looking at ourselves and we're going to say, man, that's a lot of money for some guy who, I'm sure Schwarber is not going to hit like 12 home runs or anything like that. I made a joke on that somewhere. Don't come call me on it. But, at 37 years old, if he's popping 19 bombs and has a like 104 WRC plus, and he's just a barely above league average hitter, paying him $30 million to just hold down the DH spot, that's going to suck. It's going to be really, really awful. And, very fact of the matter is the Orioles said, that's fine. That's okay. We'll go do it. And we will jump in and just, accept that hit on the back end, which, is a fundamental change in how we work. But I think it's exciting. I will transition just for 1 second to talk about Pete Alonso. I do not have an article up in front of me, but Pete Alonso lives in Tampa. The winter meetings are at the Swan and Dolphin Resort at Disney this year. Um, and so, it's just about an hour and a half for him to drive over. Apparently, Pete Alonso has gone ahead. He has made um, he has made the drive over. He has taken his time to go ahead and, uh, you know, meet with a couple teams here at the winter meetings. The Orioles were one of those confirmed teams, along with the Red Sox, which raises the opportunity cost. If you do not sign Alonso, it seems like he's going to go somewhere where he's going to be a pain in your butt for many years to come. Um, and so, this again, it's like much in the same way it is Schwarber. It's a guy who is aging, a guy who has no defensive value. I mean, he's already like legitimately bad at first base, legitimately bad. And you're again like going to be throwing a lot of money at this guy, $30 million a year at least, and you are going to try to bring him in for 3 or 4 years. And you're going to say screw the consequences. And I think that's pretty cool. And the fact that the Orioles are so heavily involved here is really fascinating. The other thing that I wanted to talk about today, and this is the more recent one, trade talks for Mr. Edward Cabrera are heating up, and the Orioles are in the mix. Edward Cabrera, for those who are uninitiated, I can't believe I didn't bring up a baseball savant. Oh man, I can't type it either. I didn't bring up his baseball savant page before this. I just jumped on. I was so excited to talk about Kyle Schwarber, about what this means for the Baltimore Orioles. But Edward Cabrera is a pitcher for the Miami Marlins. He has had great stuff for a number of years, and he has really, really struggled to command the ball, struggled to just kind of put it all together in every way, shape, and form. And I, you know, he was injured for the first portion of the season, and then he came back at the end of the year and really, really was phenomenal. You can see 3.5 ERA, that doesn't say too much, but as a starting pitcher, 137 innings, 150 strikeouts, 1.2 whip. And I guess I'll note that in 2023, that whip was 1.44. In 2024, 1.37. So pretty solid step down. His walk rate was about average, whereas in previous seasons, it was really, really bad. 8th percentile last year, 1st percentile in 2023. But last year in 2025, did go ahead and just post a pretty pedestrian 8.3% walk rate, 43rd percentile, slightly below average. That's fine. Was striking out almost 26% of guys faced. And one of the more interesting things about him, can see like from run value charts, his fastballs, I should say, there are two, both get hit pretty hard, but he's got 2 breaking balls that were wildly effective. And he's got one of the most singular, unique pitches in all of Major League Baseball. And that is this 94-mile-an-hour changeup that he throws. And, to put this in perspective, he throws a 97-mile-an-hour fastball or four-seam fastball, 96.8-mile-an-hour sinker. And then the changeup has a 3-mile-an-hour delta, even less than that, 2.8 to the four-seam, 2.6 to the sinker. 2.5-mile-an-hour change on the change. And he throws this thing so hard and manages to get 18 inches of arm side run. This thing, it comes at you like a fastball, and then it just darts off to the right, and it's demonic. It's been kind of his shtick for years. He's thrown them up to 96 miles an hour. It's this really, really unique pitch, but frankly, he's just always had this really great stuff. The fastballs, yeah, are not that impressive, frankly. But I can jump down to these pitch type splits real quick, and you can see 609 slugging allowed on the sinker. The expected slugging actually matched that perfectly, which is kind of hilarious. 534 on the four seam. So these fastballs do get hit hard, but 345 slugging on the on the slider, 245 on the sink or curveball, and 266 on the changeup. So he really, really does an excellent job with the off speed stuff. The Orioles have gone ahead and made some adjustments with, not that he's an overly low release because he is a taller guy and stands pretty upright as he throws, but a lower arm angle. The Orioles did take somebody like Sir Anthony Dominguez, talked about it on this pod, how much induced vertical break they were able to add to his four seam fastball. And remember, when you're looking at these movement plots, movement perpendicular coming off, out this way, for those of you with me on YouTube, for the podcast, I'm sorry, but movement perpendicular to your arm slot is always the hardest to generate. So if you're able to get the four seam away from that arm slot, from that 36-degree arm angle a tiny bit, get a little bit more induced vertical break on that, that will really, really play up at the top of the zone. And then you have this, awesome, awesome ensemble of off speed pitches to work with. And that's a phenomenal pitcher. It's already a really good pitcher, but that's a phenomenal pitcher with a lot of upside. I haven't actually read this article because, again, this news just came out. But it is important to note he is under control for another 3 seasons because he's had so many injuries, struggled with command, all of this stuff. He's only going to make under $4 million this coming season, projected, I should say, by MLB trade rumors. Let's see if they say anything else interesting. Nope, not really. They pretty much just go over what we talked about. I think that if I were dreaming and if I were in Eli's world and I just got to say this is what's happening, what I would hope is that the Orioles met with Pete. It went phenomenally well, and we are willing to flip a Kobe Mayo in these talks right here. I think that'd be really fascinating. Mayo. It would probably be pretty difficult to see Mayo and Kyle Stowers hitting back to back in the Miami lineup, both hitting 30 bombs maybe, but that is the price of doing business. I think that'd be pretty fascinating. I think we could appeal with somebody like a Cade Povich, young, controllable starting pitching, who hopefully, will be the level of depth. We will have brought in a couple arms and we will kick them down a couple rungs. That it's much easier to get rid of your 6th starting pitcher than it is your 4th or so. And I think Cade Povich is probably going to fall out of the picture. I think Miami might have some more opportunities for him, and a new pitching development system could also benefit him, of course. Pretty fascinating to see, what the Marlins would line up with us on. I think that, they are far and away a penny pinching team, and so the thing they're always going to want is young, controllable MLB talent, which we do have in abundance. I don't, think we're going to flip Jackson Holiday. I don't think we're going to flip a Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser, any of these guys. But some of the people on the fringes of the roster, somebody like a Dylan Beavers, Mayo, if we do have something solid with Pete coming, for example. And I should also note with Mayo, I think this is ultimately why we did tender Ryan Mountcastle a contract, in order to have insurance in the event that we did want to go and trade Kobe Mayo for somebody exactly like an Edward Cabrera. I am fascinated to see what happens, but once again, just like it is so, like the Orioles. I didn't even mention the draft lottery. So the Orioles had the 4th best odds to get the first pick in the MLB draft, and we went ahead and ended up with the 7th pick. So we got really unlucky in the lottery. That also happened tonight. You could be really, really disappointed about the Kyle Schwarber thing. It's like, okay, we offered you this awesome contract that the Phillies were not offering you, and then that they just cheated. We put this work in. We gave you this awesome deal. Come be with us. And the Phillies were just like, we'll just pay you. You go figure it out, and we'll pay you. You just tell us what to pay you, and we'll pay you. And they did it. It's ridiculous. So you could say that the Orioles have gotten hit pretty hard twice today. We've taken some arrows today, but I think at the same time, it's difficult to have been a fan of this team for as long as I have, and just not be just thrilled by being in conversations by like I mean, I was at work today, so, doing important things. I like to think they're important, just work. I was doing work and I should have been focused on work, but I just like keep refreshing, social media. I keep talking to people. I'm like, yo, what are you hearing? What are you hearing? Have you seen anything new? And this news just keeps percolating in, and I'm attached to it in a way I haven't been in a really long time. I think it's a very, very exciting time to be a fan of the Baltimore Orioles. And I think we should all just appreciate that fact in itself. It could get really, really depressing if we go ahead and none of these guys sign with us. We don't work out a trade, whatever. It's a possibility, but the way things are, being discussed both from our front office and in the media, I'm very, very hard pressed to see a situation in which the Baltimore Orioles do not come away with some truly impact talent this year, make a really good run in 2026, assuming things iron themselves out a little bit. Um, we're not talking about 2025. Yeah, we're moving on. 2026 is a new year. We got a lot of talent on this team and are looking to add some more. So that's really all I've got. As always, if you could be so kind, do subscribe to the show. Give us a follow, give us a like, heart, comment, whatever you can, and definitely feel free to, reach out to us. As always, we are on Blue Sky at thewarehousepod.bsky.social. And you can also email us, thewarehousepod@gmail.com. Always available and always happy to hear from you. Yeah, man, it's an exciting time. So, hopefully we will need to jump back on here tomorrow night and do some sort of emergency episode. I hope that is the case. But until that happens, you just keep enjoying yourself. It is the off season, so we don't need to be stressed right now. You can enjoy, you can, take from it, but don't let it take from you. That's all I'm giving you. And that's it. My name's Elijah. This has been the Warehouse Podcast, and go O's.